There was no bad advice. Well, no, that is not correct. There is almost no bad advice. No, let's run that back. Bad advice is good advice in the wrong context, in the wrong space. This morning I was having a talk with myself, as I do, and I was asking myself, what if I just did more of anything, of everything, really? I have this bad habit, you might have it too, where I already think of how something's going to go wrong before I do it, so I write it off. Or by knee-jerk reaction, I say, oh, that's not something I like doing. That's not something I want to do, and I write it off. And I was starting to think, maybe I need to think more, what if? What if I just went for it? How would that change me? What do I have to lose, and what do I have to gain from trying out a new experience? And I think that's good advice for most of us, thinking what if, or maybe even completely sidestepping what if and going head first into whichever situation you would like, or not like even, and see how you exist there. I think we should open ourselves up to new experiences that we think are a side of ourselves, out of our reach, or otherwise troublesome. But then I also thought, you know who this would be terrible advice for? People with OCD, or people with anxiety disorders worse than mine. I thought saying, hey, just think about it. What if? I think that would paralyze them. That would really hurt them. And even though I'm trying to grow out of these claws that guard and squeeze at my heart, even though I want to become a person who can think what if and not immediately be bogged down, giving that advice to the wrong person can really hurt them. But it's not bad advice. We just talked about it. We talked about all of its boons, all of its strengths. That the more life we live, the more capable we become, right? And in doing so, we become privy to all kinds of new pieces of advice, new ways and angles of looking at the world. We just become more cool in that way. But it might not be the best advice to give someone at that moment, at that time. Bad advice is just good advice in the wrong circumstances. We need an ear for context when somebody tells you something. When somebody gives you advice, they're speaking to their own experience. They're speaking to what worked for them and what didn't. And you have to do a comparison between yourself and them. And what exactly is it that makes them so compelling? I think another piece of advice that I really enjoy is don't take advice from somebody whose life you do not want to live. It's a bit closed-minded because we should have an open ear, which is another piece of advice. We should have an open ear to all kinds of different perspectives. We should be happy to listen to people's lived experiences because we could learn from that. We don't have to live their experiences to listen to theirs and learn something from them. We learn a lesson gratis doing that. But at the same time, if somebody's telling you how to do your job, how to make your thing, how to do something that you like, take it with a grain of salt. If what they're doing, what they're making, isn't akin to what you want. If someone's making Minecraft redstone tutorials, and they're telling me, I think the pacing of your video is a little off, there's not enough redstone, I think I'll brush that off. But it's a lot harder to see as the niches become closer and closer, and you have to really ask yourself, is this advice I'm willing to internalize at the moment? What has that person been through? Do you understand that person well enough to know where that advice is coming from? Because the where is very important. There's that piece of advice that rich people love to tout that goes, money does not buy happiness. I was listening to Hobo Johnson the other day. They are a musician, and they have a lyric that says, I made $1 million. Then I spent it all on therapy. And instead of being a fantastic lyric, a really meaningful one, you think of a person who's made success, who's been successful, and you think they're happy. You think that by the end of their road that they're already happy, that they're put together. But that might not be the case. There are people with money who are unhappy, and we immediately think of them as ungrateful, because money would solve so many of our problems. Rich people say that money doesn't buy happiness, but what does that buy for us, people who don't have it? It does buy happiness. It buys security. It buys food. It buys experiences, it buys opportunity. The have-nots look at that money and what they can do for us, and we hear people say this stuff and go, what are you talking about even? When you don't have these things and you want these things, it's hard to really internalize money doesn't buy happiness. Because it does. We would at least be less burdened. But these people, these rich people, when they tell you this, they're telling you this because they've hit a void. They've hit an existential void once all of their base level needs are met. How many of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? It is a little pyramid that starts from physiological needs at the bottom to safety and security to love and belonging, and then at its top, self-actualization. A lot of us want to be up there already when we're barely getting by on meeting our physiological needs, being fed night to night, or safety needs, knowing that we'll be able to pay the rent the next month. And hearing people who are at self-actualization tell us money isn't everything sounds so condescending. Of course, money is everything for us because we haven't hit those needs yet. But what happens when you have all that money and your parents still fight? And you can't cure that disease that is ravaging your body? That you can't hold down a meaningful relationship for so long? When you have money and you have problems it doesn't solve, you get this inkling of a brilliant idea that you must have something aside of money, aside of materiality, to base your happiness on, whether it be yourself or whether it be someone else or something. Because the happiness that you need is a happiness money cannot buy. And if you are another rich person, that is brilliant advice. That is fantastic advice. Because often people have a lot of the same problems when they're in the same space. And maybe another rich person has hit that point. I have my 3 cars and my 5 houses, and I don't know why I'm still upset. And that advice hits them to their core. They really feel it, and they start changing their lives. Because they can, because it is advice for them. What it isn't advice for is for the rest of us. We have to work. We have to do things to even get to the baseline where we can feel those particular problems. So of course for us, money does buy happiness, and it is ignorant to say otherwise. In closing, all bad advice is just good advice in the wrong context. Eventually you will hit those problems. Eventually you'll be in a space where you need that advice, but as long as it's not for you yet, it can be really, really frustrating and infuriating to hear. So ignore it. You know, or at least you will develop an ear for what advice actually applies to you and what you can mobilize and what you can do. And that is the most important part of picking and choosing what advice you listen to. That's the good advice. Ding, 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 10 minutes.